Us to understand you can't keep spending the way we always have. This is time to make the tough decisions. That's what we're going to start to do.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, same question. You heard your opponent say that generating revenue was not as important as other things. How do you tackle that issue?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, we've got to get back to the basics. We have to understand what government's responsibility is. I think there's four core issues. Number one, to keep its citizens safe and secure with law enforcement, with the judicial system, with the prison system, with our infrastructure. Not only is that safety, but that's economic development. Also, education and Medicaid. Those are two mandates that we have to have. But once we cut that down, once we focus on those core issues, it is important to grow the economy. It is important to grow jobs. I would do three things from the outset. Number one is total tax reform, comprehensive tax reform, a system that's fair, that's flatter, that helps businesses that are here and businesses coming into South Carolina. Number two, focus on the Department of Commerce, having a first-run, first-class, well-funded Department of Commerce, and a governor that's going to roll up his sleeves and bring jobs and economic growth. And third, we've got 30 to 40,000 jobs in South Carolina that are unfilled because we don't have the skilled workers. Let's make sure that we've got those skilled workers, hire them on the job training, so it's a benefit for the unemployed worker and the manufacturer at the same time.
Governor Sanford says that the next budget writers for not this fiscal year, but the next one, will be forced to choose between savagely cutting state agencies' budgets and thereby hurting the least of these served by government, or materially raising taxes on all South Carolinians. Given that choice, which one would you choose?
Well, I've taken a no new taxes pledge, and when we talk about comprehensive tax reform, we've got to come up with a system that is a more stable system and putting all of the options on the table. We've also got to go back and look at those core issues. What is government's main responsibility? You know, in good times, we've always said everything's a priority, and when everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. We've got to set those priorities, and we've got to look at how we spend. We've got to have zero-based budgeting. We've got to have an accounting, a total up and down look at our agencies to make sure that we're not duplicating our services and that those dollars go to exactly where we want them to go.
We have an email question from Lee DeSantis in Columbia, and Representative Haley, this is for you. It says, many have said if you are elected, we will have another 4 years of Mark Sanford and another toxic legislative executive relationship with more State House gridlock. If elected governor, please differentiate your approach when working with our legislative body versus that approach of Governor Sanford's.
And, you know, we're very different people. Just like you have two children that are different, you know, people are different in terms of their personalities. This is what I can tell you. First of all, I've been in the legislature long enough to know what the problems are, but I haven't been in the legislature long enough to be part of the fraternity party. The key to leading in the legislature and the key to being governor is to, one, put forward a plan that can tell them where we want to go as a state and educate the people and educate the legislature on how we're going to get there. The second thing is being predictable, telling them what we're going to do before we do it, giving the consequences before they happen. The goal that I want to have is the first year in office to give South Carolina a win. I want the legislature to feel what it's like to really win for the people of the state, and I want the people to feel what it's like when they return and have the power of the government again. This can be done, but it takes a governor that can turn around and show an agenda of where we need to go, how we need to get there, with a plan of looking at year 3 and 5 and 7. I think the people are going to be pleasantly surprised.
You say you're not part of that fraternity, but in order to get anything done, don't you have to drink from their keg, so to speak, a little bit in order to...
You know, you actually don't have to, Ben. I mean, I think the important thing is, look, I was chairman of the freshman class. I was majority whip. I was put on a powerful business committee and subcommittee chair. I can get along with the legislature and I can lead. But when I saw something wrong, when I saw that votes were being passed by a voice vote, and I would be embarrassed if you saw what I saw, I sat there and fought and said, we've got to start voting on the record. We differed on that. The legislature opposed me for 2.5 years on that, but I knew that until we got a good government, we couldn't get a working government. My goal is to get things done.
And a quick scheduling note, in case you missed any of this debate, we plan to re-air it tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern here.
We'll continue to work on other issues, but when they are wrong, my goal is to side with the people of the state, not with the legislature. My goal is to educate and make sure that people know what we're doing, why we're doing it. I will make sure I go into every one of those districts where they vote for good government, pro-business reforms, and praise them for it. But I will also go into those districts when they vote against good government, pro-business reforms, and hold those legislators' hands to the fire. I think I owe that to the people of the state.
Let me ask you a quick question before we get into a brief follow-up before we get into the next question. And Congressman Barrett mentioned that he is committed to a no new taxes pledge. Are you also willing to make that same pledge to voters?
You know, I think that it's a piece of paper that I think is something that, you know, it's a signature that says you're making a promise. I'd tell you, go look back at what I've done. I've never increased taxes because I think what you spend is important. As an accountant in a family-run small business, we saw what it meant to stretch a dollar. Yes, I have signed the tax pledge. Yes, I will tell you I won't increase taxes, but I'm going to focus on how we spend. That's what's important.
Okay, South Carolina's emergency rooms are becoming holding areas for the mentally ill, essentially because patients have nowhere else to turn. Given the current state budget crisis and the drastic reductions in the Department of Mental Health that they've already absorbed through across-the-board cuts, what would you do to address this problem, Congressman Barrett?
Well, again, Judy, you know, taking care of people that can't take care of themselves is extremely important. That's a mandate that the state government has. And again, we've got to get back and take a look at those core issues. You know, there's some things that government does that should do in good times, but when they're not good times, we need to think outside of the box. Is it something we can do a public-private partnership on, where we can have inclusiveness and thinking different ways to fund it? Is it something that we can outsource or privatize? You know, I think there's so many things that we always think that government has to do.
Do you think mental health is one of those things that government should take care of?
Absolutely.
So how would you address that problem in the ER?
Well, again, listen, we've got to talk to the hospitals. We've got to get them involved in it. The governor's got to bring people together and address these major issues because, listen, we're going to have to cut some major spending. We're going to have to focus on those core issues and how we can fund these through outside sources.
Okay, before we go to break, we wanted each of you to prioritize each of these different issues. Illegal immigration, jobs, and education. Those hot topics, how would you rank those if you become governor?
Representative Haley.
Representative Haley first.
Jobs first, education second, illegal immigration third.
And Congressman Barrett?
I think she's right, but you know, there again, it's kind of hard to separate any of them, but I would go with jobs first, education second, immigration third.
All right, well, speaking of all of those topics, we will tackle all of those when we come back after this short break.
And welcome back. Before we went to break, we asked the candidates tonight to list their priorities, and jobs came up at the top. So we want to tackle jobs right now. And Representative Haley, you are first. Your plan for economic prosperity is to eliminate the small business income tax. You've talked about that a lot. How much money does that represent? And how would you replace that loss of revenue in the state?
You know, the interesting thing is, first of all, as an accountant, we've got one of the most band-aided tax structures in the country. So we need to look at every tax, every exemption, and every fee, because a fee is a tax. One of the first things we need to do is eliminate the small business income tax. Right now, it is about 3% of our budget. And it's interesting, Ben, because in year 2005, 2006, and 2007, when government grew by $1 billion a year, nobody asked what you're going to cut. Yet at this point, when we talk about eliminating small business income tax, everybody wants to know how you're going to replace it. The key is, when you give businesses cash flow, when you give them profit margins, the first thing they do is hire people. They invest back into their state. It is the #1 thing that can spur our economy quickly and get people back to work quickly and help the economy grow in a way that will really make it strengthen. And so it's 3% of our budget. I know there are things we can cut. The Education Oversight Committee, which is just more of a committee that advises as opposed to doing something, you know, looking at the education and how expensive it is on the overhead side as opposed to in the classroom, and also turning around and looking at the Budget and Control Board that employs 1,057 people.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, the first item on your jobs plan on your website is to take immediate action to fill job openings. Explain exactly what that means and how it's different from what the newly formed Department of Employment and Workforce is doing right now.
Well, from what I understand, the Budget and Control Board says there's roughly 30,000 to 40,000 jobs that are unfilled in South Carolina because we don't have trained workers. And what we would do automatically is link up unemployed people with those workers, hire them on the spot so they get off the unemployment rolls, let the employer employ them, and give them on-the-job training. The way I understand it, we've got 2 workforce development funds in South Carolina. It's not just the workforce development funds. We need to make sure we streamline budgeting when we're looking for every dollar. I'll give you another perfect example in education. We've got 4 educational budgets in South Carolina: EIA, EAA, EFA, and First Steps. As a former business person, it just makes sense when you're stretching every dollar, when you're trying to get those dollars into the classroom, and by the way, out of 65 cents at a national average going to the classroom, only 44 cents makes it to the classroom in South Carolina. But when you're trying to stretch those, it makes sense to streamline the process and be effective, effective as you can.
Thank you very much.
Representative Haley, to promote economic prosperity, you say that we should take advantage of our technical schools and skill the workers that our employers need. The leaders of our technical system, though, technical college system, would argue that that's exactly what they're doing right now. Can you be more specific in what you're in explaining what needs to be done differently?
Absolutely. You know, what we're seeing is we're spending $12,000 a year to educate a child in this state. It's going through 1,000 people at the Department of Education and 85 school districts before it ever touches a teacher and student in the classroom. We are only graduating 1 out of every 2 kids in 4 years. 1 out of every 2. What we need to do is understand we're losing them in 9th grade. We need to start looking at what's happening career-wise in 8th grade. We need to look at vocational programs in 9th grade, and we need to strengthen our technical schools. We have amazing technical schools in this state, but they are not getting the funding that they need. We need to hold institutions of higher learning accountable. Right now, funding for higher ed is happening based on the number of lobbyists in the State House. That's not how we need to be funding. I'm a proud graduate of Clemson, but if you look at the funding Clemson gets versus the funding of all 16 technical schools, it's not right. It's not balanced. We need to make sure we strengthen our technical schools so that they have programs that are helping our small businesses and also helping recruit new companies to the state.
You talk about technical schools not being funded correctly. In the recession, we know that their budgets have been cut by nearly 50%. You were part of the legislature, though, that brought that on, that allowed that to happen. Do you bear some of the responsibility for that, though?
As governor, I will show the importance of why we need to strengthen our technical schools. As a legislator yesterday, when we dealt with the vetoes, those were 3 that I overrode because we don't need to pull money from the technical schools. That actually strengthens jobs. That actually helps skill our workers, and that will help our unemployment rate. So I stand by making sure that technical schools are strong.
Congressman Bear, we have another question along those same lines from a viewer. It's actually from Robert Lentz in Columbia, who has served on a technical college board for 16 years. And Robert says our only source to balance the budget is to increase tuition, and that they're now threatened by a senior senator who wants to put caps on tuition. What would you do to bring funding to higher education up to par with our neighboring states?
Well, one of the things we'd have to do, I think, is give our colleges, our universities, our community colleges, they're not technical schools anymore, they're community colleges, give them some flexibility. You know, if we're going to fund them at the levels we tell them we're going to, then we need to hold their feet to the fire and say, this is exactly how you have to work. But if we're not going to, let's give them some flexibility. Let's give them the ability to, again, to go outside of that box to figure out how they can keep their tuition low, how they can be a better dollar value for the average person that's struggling to go to college, that's trying to meet that daily budget. My son went to his first year at Tri-County Community College, Tri-County Technical School, and I saw a self-assuredness and a self-confidence from my son that I've never seen before. They're vital parts of our community, and giving them that flexibility, whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year institution, I think is vital to our funding needs.
Thank you.
Our next question is it involves an issue that was brought up by the AARP, one of our sponsors here tonight. We do know that this question is for you, Representative Haley, by the way. Your opponent's jobs plan includes improving our infrastructure. What specific improvements do you have in your plan that you would like to make? And with a $1 billion budget shortfall for next year, where are we going to find the money?
You know, what we have to do is understand that when we're looking at economic development, when companies come to this state, they don't need to be coming because we smile and take them to dinner. They need to come because we have a good business climate. What they look for is, number one, a tax structure that is fair, that allows them to be successful and allow them to strengthen. That is something I will work on as an accountant right away. The second thing they look for is a skilled workforce. It's the reason we want to strengthen our technical schools. It's the reason we need to pay attention to K through 12 and make sure that we are giving them the workforce they need. And the third thing they look at is infrastructure. It is roads, it is airfare, so that we are not flying out of Charlotte and Savannah, but we actually have that here in this state. And it's our ports, making sure that our ports are strong so that they can come in and out. It is a very simple process of making sure that the environment for our economic development is strong in the state, but then we also want to make sure we're not looking at just bringing large quantities of companies to this state, but we're also looking at the quality of companies that come to this state so that they help the small businesses we already have.
So is building our infrastructure, improving our infrastructure, is that out of the question for the next fiscal year because so much money has been cut out, or are there other ways to fund this?
It is all about priorities. You know, everyone's talking about the fact that we don't have money. What we have is a tight budget year. What we do have is the ability to prioritize. And we have to turn around and decide, look, are we going to turn around and realize that infrastructure is an issue? Or are we going to turn around and say, you know, that spending on the Education Oversight Committee, which doesn't do anything, is an issue? It is about cutting things that maybe aren't working right now for more important things that would work right now. That's what we need to do. And as an accountant, as a legislator that knows the budget, we are going to jump right in and make those hard decisions, but they're going to be decisions that affect people immediately.
Congressman Barrett, your jobs plan also includes promoting tourism in South Carolina. Be specific in explaining how you would do that and put a price tag on it.
Well, I don't know that you can put a price tag on it because every dollar that you spend, I think it either triples or doubles or whatever, because South Carolina is a wonderful place to visit. It's a good, clean industry.
But how much would you want to spend on doing that, on promoting tourism?
Well, I mean, we'll certainly take a look at it. I don't know that you could put a specific dollar amount on it, and we're open to suggestions, but bringing people into South Carolina to the Grand Strand, to the Low Country, to the beautiful mountains where I live is a wonderful way not only to showcase our area, but to get those dollars in. And when we're talking about bringing tourism in, we've got to think about infrastructure too. I-73. Do we need to think about public-private partnerships? Do we need to think about working with the congressional delegation, the local delegations on our infrastructure? What about devolution? I've been working with Jim DeMint on that specific issue. South Carolina, as you well know, Judy, is a donor state when it comes to road tax money. Let's keep our own road tax money. Let's solve these problems here in South Carolina because we can do it better than any federal agency.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we want to break it up here a little bit and go with some yes or no questions for both of you. Would you support any of these ideas to increase funding for our deficient highway system? Increasing fuel taxes, Representative Haley?
No.
How about adding sales tax to fuel?
No.
No.
Increasing user fees?
No.
No.
Tolling some highways like I-95?
No.
Yes. On new construction. It's a way to think about how we're affecting our program. If it's new construction, if it's an additional lane, that's something that we can think of, absolutely.
And then what I want to say is when you talk about that, once again, you're talking about band-aiding a structure. We need comprehensive tax reform. That means some things go up and some things go down. That doesn't mean we're saying absolutely cut everything. It's about a plan. You can't just say, we're going to do this and not do this. That's the problem with South Carolina that's happened this far. We have to have a complete plan of where the money's going to come from and where it's going to go.
But it's also thinking outside of the box. I mean, you know, we're in uncharted territory right here. I mean, we've never had a downturn in my lifetime. We've never had a downturn like this, and we've got to think outside of the box, and I think that's one solution. Also, I'm a big proponent of the natural gas reserves off the coast of South Carolina, using those for jobs and economic growth. It could be $250 million at a minimum, according to the National Petroleum Institute, that we could use for whatever we see fit. And what I would propose is that we use 70% for infrastructure, 20% for law enforcement, and then 10% to roll back into alternative or renewable energy.
Thank you very much. Representative Haley, you've mentioned several times that you want to completely revamp the tax code, look at every tax, every fee, every exemption. Give voters a realistic timeline on how long that's going to take.
You know, I think we're going to have to work quickly and fast, but what I would like to say is 6 months into the administration, we have something that we can actually start to pull out and put together so that after the first year, we've actually got something in place. I want it to really show what will happen in the first year, in year 3, in year 5, and in year 7, and make sure that it creates a competitive business environment for this state.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, what is your evaluation of Ms. Haley's plan to promote economic prosperity? I'm sure you know it well since she is your opponent. Do you believe it's a viable plan to bring more jobs here to South Carolina?
Well, you know, I haven't really seen an actual plan. I mean, I've got a plan. It's called Putting South Carolina Back to Work. It's an 8-step common sense business principle plan. It's a plan that we worked on for over a year with people all across the state. We worked with economic developers, we worked with senators, with legislators, with academia heads. I mean, we put a plan together, and that's how I think you have to govern in South Carolina. You know, even though I'd love to see the hand of the governor strengthen, it's still going to be a legislative state. So when you propose something, you've got to have people that buy into it. So when you propose it, it's not my idea, it's our idea. And that's how we proposed our putting South Carolina back to work plan.
Representative Haley?
There is a plan. You know, the thing is, we don't go into 7 and 8 and 9 steps. That's not the key. It's not about what you say, it's what you do. And that's why I've talked about tax reform. That's why I've talked about workers' comp reform and tort reform, and making sure that we put an economic development director in place that I work with every single day so that we can compete to get the good quality companies into the state.
It's now your opportunity to pose a question to Congressman Barrett.
Any question?
Any question?
You know, I said earlier, we've been on the campaign trail so many times, I think I know everything he's going to say before he says it. But I think, you know, I'll just give you the same question I gave you earlier today, which was, do you regret passing the $800 billion TARP bailout that literally would cost South Carolina families and everybody else across this country $6,000 per family?
Well, I'll say it again, Representative Haley. I didn't have 6 months to wait before I made a decision. My president came to me, President George W. Bush, and said, we're in a crisis. We're going to have a global crisis. Not only President Bush, Vice President Cheney, men and women across the state, big businesses, small businesses. I believe we were at a point, literally within days or hours, that people were going to reach in their back pocket, pull out their ATM card, stick it in the slot, and nothing was going to come out. And I had to make a decision based on the information that I had because I couldn't wait. That's what leaders have to do. Did it avert a major crisis, a global meltdown? I believe it did. Has it been implemented like it was supposed to be? Absolutely not. And nobody has fought harder to ensure that every dollar is repaid to the American taxpayer and it never happens again.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Congressman Barrett.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to shift gears and talk about education. We'll be right back with our WIS GOP gubernatorial debate. Welcome back to our gubernatorial GOP debate. We are picking up with education now. Our next question is an important issue to the League of Women Voters, one of the sponsors for tonight's debate, but also to everybody who cares about equality in education here in South Carolina. Let's specifically address Act 388. And just to give a little background up front, it took effect in 2007. In a nutshell, it exempts owner-occupied homes from property taxes that pay for schools. That law added a penny sales tax that was supposed to replace the revenue, but the recession hit, people stopped spending, and school districts say it has cost them millions of dollars. So the bottom line is, what used to be a very reliable and predictable source of income has now become very volatile based on the mood of the economy. Here's the question first to Representative Haley. Do you support changing or repealing Act 388?
I think Act 388 needs to be studied with everything else. And yes, I think it's one of those things that we're going to have to look at. If we're going to do comprehensive tax reform, we have to look at everything on top of the way the Department of Education spends and the way that education funding formula is devised.
So you are willing to consider changing it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what we saw was the plan of Act 388 was initially meant to help primary homeowners. But the result of that was it hurt businesses and it hurt investment people. What we need to make sure of is the legislature said, oh, but we'll take care of them next year. The biggest lesson learned was there never is a next year in the legislature. If you're going to do it right the first year or don't do it at all.
Well, you know a lot about running a business. You talk about that a lot. You cannot effectively plan and budget if you do not know how much money you're working with. You know, a lot of these school systems, they look at their current funding at the beginning of the year, and because of this, it changes throughout the year, and they have to do cuts at different points during the year. I mean, looking at education as a business, you know, is that sound business?
What is sound business is that we need to reform our education funding formula. I was born and raised in a rural area where we didn't know what we didn't have, in Bamberg. Then I lived in Orangeburg, where they spent more time on discipline than they ever did teaching in the classroom. Now I'm blessed to represent Lexington County, where every public school is like a private one. But you go into my schools in Lexington, and there's a smart board in every classroom. You go into my schools in Bamberg, and they don't have those opportunities. We need to educate children because they deserve a good quality education, and that's our future workforce, not based on where they happen to be born and raised. We've got inequities across the state that have to be changed. When we reform the way we fund education, when we add merit-based pay for teachers, reward those teachers for going into those challenged areas, and then turn around and give teachers bonuses for improving educational standards. It will separate the good teachers from the poor teachers in terms of performance, and it will turn around and make a huge difference at our educational standards in South Carolina.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up before we move to Congressman Barrett, and just a yes or no. You are, though, definitely willing to consider changing Act 388, even though many Republican legislators would view that as a tax increase.
Absolutely. If we're going to do true tax reform, you have to include it in there. We can't say, no, we're not going to touch that. It's important.
Okay, Congressman Barrett, do you support changing or repealing Act 388?
I think the problem in the past, Ben and Judy, has been we have taken a rifle shot approach, so to speak, to our taxes. Act 388, the grocery tax, the sales tax, the cigarette tax. I think we've got to look at our tax system holistically, how we can come up with a system that's fair and that's flatter, that is more sustainable and more accountable. And I just think that's important if we're going to budget like you're talking about. You know, I've also talked with Hal Clyburn, who's a dear friend of mine, who's on the forecaster, the budget forecaster board. We need to take a look at how we budget in South Carolina. What about doing something totally outside of the box? Have a budget freeze 1 year and totally do something different where we actually know how much money is in the bank before we actually allocate it. That may be a different way of looking at something, but at least we don't have to go back during the middle of the year once, twice, maybe even 3 times and say, we're going to have to cut your budget again.
So as it relates specifically to Act 388, are you willing to change or repeal it just so that voters are clear?
I think we need to look at everything holistically, and that includes all of our taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question is from a viewer, Ms. Haley. Brent White asked the question, with teacher salaries being cut and the National Board Program being slimmed down, what would you do to keep the best and the brightest teachers in our state, especially in the rural areas?
You know, the amazing thing is in business, when we see revenue fall, we always cut from the top. You never cut the core of the people that need it the most. We should not be talking about teacher furloughs. We should not be talking about teacher layoffs. What we should be talking about is that we have 1,000 people working at the Department of Education, or that we have 85 school districts. What we need to make sure is that if that money's not going to the teacher, student, and technology in the classroom, it is not going to the right place. That is what we need to be talking about. And right now, that has not been the issue. And until we realize that we are too top heavy in this state, we have got to do merit-based pay for teachers. When they go into those challenge areas, we need to reward them for it. When they improve educational standards, we need to give them bonuses just like you do in business, because we will separate the good teachers from those that aren't performing as well. It will make a big difference. But government needs to get out of the way of the teacher. They need to let the teacher teach, and we need to look at how we pay them based on performance and not sit there and throw tons of things at them and expect them to produce.
Congressman Barrett, your ideas for keeping quality teachers in South Carolina?
Well, I do agree with merit-based pay, taking care of our teachers, cutting from the top before we certainly cut our teachers. But it's like our frontline soldiers don't have the resources that they need. My wife's a first grade school teacher, and I can't tell you the numbers of Sundays when she's packing her lunch. She's got a new pack of paper and a new pack of pencils and a brand new book that she and I have bought for her classroom. The fact of the matter is, for every dollar we spend in South Carolina, only 44 cents makes it to the classroom. I think it's actually lower than that. The national average is 65 cents. Those dollars need to go into instructional classroom needs where they are most needed. Our teachers on the front line. I said it earlier, we can streamline that process. We've got 46 counties, we've got 85 school districts, and 64 different funding sources going into that plate of spaghetti. We can streamline that process. We've got 4 educational budgets in South Carolina: EIA, EAA, EFA, and First Steps. The business person in me says, you know what? 1 makes more sense than 4 if we want to make a difference in education.
Thank you very much.
Next question. Of course, this is a story that got a lot of attention here on WIS when we covered it. The state recently purchased used school buses from another state, it's actually Kentucky, with the aging fleet of buses that become more unreliable as the miles are added on and cost more to, of course, maintain. What is your solution to make sure our children are transported safely and on time?
You know, the amazing thing is we are the only state in the country that does not privatize our school bus system. The government should not be in the business of maintaining and having school buses. Every other state in the country factors that out to some other company, and so what happens is you've got good quality buses that have air conditioning, that if they break down, someone's quickly there to do it, that are brand new, that we don't have to deal with it. That's the problem with South Carolina, is they're trying to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to be in the school bus business. We need to make sure that we have the private sector get involved and privatize the school bus system like all the other states in the country.
You've been in the House for some time now, so why hasn't it happened?
It has come up a couple of times. Actually, Representative Smith from Aiken has proposed it, and and it has not been passed. As governor, I will turn around and show them how much we are actually losing by trying to maintain a school bus fleet and how much we could save, and look at all the other states on what it would mean to privatize that school bus fleet.
Congressman Barrett, the same question?
I think it's a great idea. You know, I don't know that 49 are wrong and 1 is right. But again, it's thinking outside of the box to put children, or to even think about putting children on a substandard mode of transportation when they're the most precious thing in their life. I know that my children are. I think is unconscionable, and we need to think outside of the box.
You just mentioned a moment ago about the number of school districts in the state, and we actually have a question from our live chat asking, why do we have 46 counties and 85 school districts? Can that be changed? Should it be changed? Congressman Barrett?
Could it be changed? Absolutely. Should it be changed? I think so. I would not mandate it, though. I think that, you know, we always talk about mission creep. We always talk about the federal government coming into the state and telling us what to do. We always talk about the state coming in and telling the locals what to do. That needs to be a local decision. But let's work a little deal here. I'll give you some I'll give you some flexibility in your school district if you show me accountability, if you show me transparency, and you show me that those dollars are actually getting into that classroom. If you've got 1 county and 10 school districts, I'm being a little facetious, but I think you get the point. I think when we do that, our school districts will say, you know what, we can figure it out better than Columbia. We know how to get those dollars in the classroom. We need to streamline the process. I don't need somebody in Columbia telling me how to do it, but I think working the deal with accountability, with transparency and flexibility, I think it's a great solution.
Thank you.
On our Cover It Live, Liza's really holding us a little accountable here. Representative Haley, she's wanting more specifics on merit-based pay for public school teachers. How would you get this done, and what would it entail?
You know, I don't know about the specifics. What I know is it works in business, and if it works in business, it can work in education. I think that you can't expect a teacher to go into a challenged area where they have to be the parent and the pastor and the guidance counselor and the nurse and all of those things, and turn around and pay them the same thing you would pay a teacher in an area that they don't have those cultural issues. I think merit-based pay needs to happen. That's the only way we're going to get strong and a new teacher workforce into those challenged areas. It's also the reason why I think we need to reward teachers for doing well in the classroom. We've got to improve the morale of our teachers, and when we strengthen them, that will happen. But it's something that I think is very important. We'll look at the way other states do it, and we'll see how we can implement that into South Carolina.
A quick short answer follow-up kind of on this merit-based concept there. Your opponent, Congressman Barrett, suggests that that's a great idea to run the Commerce Department, to set it up on a system where there's a reward in that merit-based pay system. You think that's a good idea?
It's already happening now. We already do that in the Department of Commerce. So it's not a matter of trying to implement that now. They already do that. They started that a couple of years ago.
Congressman Barrett, do you want to respond?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it works in the private.
But not a new idea?
I'm sorry?
But it's not a new idea?
We've talked about it a long time. I'm glad they implement it because it works in the private sector. If it works in the private sector, it should work in the public sector.
Earlier in the debate, we allowed Representative Haley to ask Congressman Barrett a question. It's now your turn to ask Representative Haley a question.
Fantastic. Representative Haley, I applaud you for putting all your documents out there. We've both campaigned on accountability and transparency. I just want to know, and I want you to tell the viewers, have all of your are all of your disclosures public? Have you left anything out? I understand there might be something with Wilbur Smith that was omitted, and I just wanted to make sure everything was in there.
Everything was in there. We've always said that we would put everything out there. We have released our tax returns. Everyone has it. We have also released our funding disclosures for everyone, and I had no problem doing that. Everything's out there. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break, and we'll have our final round of questioning when we come back.
And welcome back to the debate. We want to continue with our questioning right now to Congressman Barrett. We want to talk about illegal immigration right now. You have put illegal immigration in the forefront of your campaign. You estimate 60 to 85,000 illegal immigrants are here in South Carolina. It's sort of a two-part question here for you. How is there any possible way to know exactly how many illegal immigrants are in this state, since they fly so under the radar?
Well, I guess it's the best guess, swag, so to speak. But the fact of the matter is, with illegal immigration, every state is a border state. I mean, they're taking jobs away from South Carolinians. They're costing us taxpayer dollars in different areas. We need to do several different things. I think I applaud Jan Brewer in Arizona because she's trying to take her state back. The fact of the matter is the federal government has not done that. And South Carolina can do a couple of things. Number one, we can hold our employers accountable, make sure that who they hire is who they say they're hire. And number two, we can enhance our immigration laws with some common sense additional things like what they did in Arizona. And number three, we can implement a plan called the 287G, where we train our local and state law enforcement officers on how to enforce immigration law in South Carolina. We're doing it in Charleston, in York, in Beaufort. I've talked to the sheriff in Charleston County, and it's actually working. We can be masters of our own destiny.
Another estimate from you here. You say that these workers earn $186 million a year here in South Carolina. Let's just say we deport all of them, all of the 60 to 85,000 illegal immigrants. Who will fill these jobs?
Well, I would hope
a lot of them are hard labor jobs.
Yeah, I would hope that they would be South Carolinians. I mean, the last time I looked, our unemployment was about 11.2, 11.6% unemployment. So, you know, Ben, I think we're looking at putting people back to work in South Carolina. And listen, if they're here legally, God bless them. I mean, this nation is a nation of immigrants, and we have laws to do that. If you want to come into this nation and do it legally, God bless you, we want you to. But if you're here illegally, if you're knowingly and wantonly breaking the law, then we're going to do what needs to be done, and that's enforce the law, enforce the immigration laws of this land, and get you out of our state.
Representative Haley, before we move to the next question, I'd just like to get you to weigh in on the illegal immigration issue. Do you support an Arizona-style law here in South Carolina? A lot of people are talking about this on our live chat.
Yes, I'm a co-sponsor of the Arizona-style illegal immigration reform. I will tell you, as the daughter of immigrants who came here legally, we are a country of immigrants, but more importantly, we're a country of laws. And when you give up being a country of laws, you've given up everything that you're founded on.
Do you have any concerns about the enforcement aspect of it, though?
I do, absolutely, because South Carolina passed an illegal immigration reform bill last year. The problem is they turned around and praised the fact that there is an e-verify system that small business owners have to go through. There is penalties for if they break that. The problem is they didn't put the first dollar in the prosecution fund until we started looking at that stimulus package last year, and we saw that there wasn't the first dollar here. That's why government needs to be accountable. It can't just be that they pass something. We have to go back and see that it actually works. We need to make sure that we've got reports in place to say how many illegal immigrants are here, how many businesses are being fined, and what are we doing about it. And in your question that you asked Congressman Barrett on what would you do to, for these jobs that we can't fill, we need to expand our worker visa program. We need to work with the federal delegation system so that those farmers and those contractors and all those people who can't fill those jobs, there is a way to do that legally, but it has to be done legally. No amnesty.
Let me move on to the next question, which is a little personal, and I just want to give you an opportunity to respond. It's been a hot topic on the live chat, and the national media has asked you a lot about it concerning your faith. And we got one question earlier today from George Boatwright in Lexington, who says, you state at the end of your campaign commercial, all things through God are possible. Are you a Christian? Where do you worship? And do you attend your parents' church?
First of all, I will tell you, I am very proud of my parents. I am proud of the way they raised us. They taught us work ethic. They taught us everything that I know I am today. So I will never apologize for that, and I will always continue to be proud of everything they have accomplished in this country, because they are the ones that reminded us every day how blessed we were to be here. I chose to become a Christian woman. My husband is a Christian man. We have a Christian family. When my parents ask us to visit their church, absolutely I go to their church. The same way when Michael's parents ask us to go to their church, we do that. But the bottom line is, yes, I chose the Christian faith, and what I know about Christianity is that they are all accepting, and they try and bring more people in. They don't judge people. I attend Mount Horeb United Methodist Church in Lexington, as does my husband and do my children.
Let me ask you a brief follow-up, because I think that people have questions about things when they don't understand it. Do you mind explaining to voters a little bit about the Sikh faith, what the difference is between Christianity and what led to your conversion?
I think that, first of all, we all have decisions to make, and my older brother decided to go with the Christian faith because it worked for us, and because it was something that we decided to do. What I don't want to do is talk about anything about the Sikh faith, because I am very proud of the way I was raised. I'm very proud of those people that raised me that were within that church. The decision that Michael and I made is the decision that works for our family, and we continue to walk every day trying to be better people, walking and strengthening our relationship with the Lord. And I think that that's something that we will continue to do for us and for our family. But I am very proud of my parents and very proud of the way they raised me, and I don't want to say anything negative against them or against that faith.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, how do your religious beliefs play a role in what you do every day and decisions that you make every day? If you are elected governor, would your religious beliefs influence decisions, important decisions that you have to make as governor?
It's who I am, and it's what I am as a person, Ben. You know, it drives my every decision. It drives the way I live. It drives the way I bring up my family. I mean, I'm a sinner saved by grace. I serve a living God who is Jesus Christ. And, you know, He's in my heart every day. And there are absolutes. When I talk to my children, when I talk to to schools, I say, you know, things are not shades of gray. There are absolutes in our life. And there's 10 of them if you want to be exact. And I try to live by those every day. And I tell you, my children were actually saved during this campaign. And tell you, win or lose, that's important. But the big thing is that my children have been saved, and that's a good day any day.
Let me ask a question about another sensitive subject. We hear so much about needing to be more inclusive in South Carolina. Of course, if elected governor, you would be working for all of the people in this state. The question is, as we look at the television ads, particularly on the Republican side, we don't see a lot of racial or ethnic diversity. Why not? Representative Haley?
I mean, you're looking at a minority female. The ethnic diversity is right.
But as we see the other people pictured in the ads, I mean, obviously you represent a diversity in terms of women and your background in raising, but why don't we see more diversity on the Republican side?
I don't know necessarily about the commercials as much as I do about this state. As we go across this state, you know, as people talk about the Tea Parties and as I talk about joining the movement, I can tell you the Tea Parties aren't a party at all. They are Republicans, Democrats, and Independents who have said we've had enough of government and we're going to take it back. Those are men and women. Those are all faiths. Those are all minorities. And I mean, it's one of the things that I think has made South Carolina really come together and say we want to take our government back. So, you know, you could talk about commercials, but I'll talk about what I see on the campaign trail, which is as I go across the state, I've never seen people more spirited about their government and elected officials so scared. It's a beautiful thing, and I want to make sure we work for all people in South Carolina.
Congressman Barrett, we wanted to ask you the same question. I mean, your ads, of course, McMaster's and Bowers' ads and Miss Haley's ads, you know, when you play these ads out on the air, you hope to show the people who you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
And I know that the Republican Party in the state is trying to be more diversified. So was there decisions like that being made when you were coming up with your campaign plan and your ads in particular?
I will say this, Ben, we can all be more sensitive, and we should be. You know, and that's something we're going to go back and take a look. But I'll tell you, as a congressman, I have diversity on my staff, in my district. You know, it's my job to serve everybody in the 3rd Congressional District. I don't care whether they're rich or poor, black or white, male or female. If they walk into my door and they know my heart and they know my staff, I don't care who you are. I don't even care if you're in my district. We're going to help everybody in our district. And I tell you, in South Carolina, until we pick up the bottom boat and raise that level, then we're all going to suffer. And I don't care who that is. And you're right. We all need to be more sensitive to that.
The next question is for Representative Haley. Mitt Romney, who will be here in South Carolina to campaign with you tomorrow, and I believe his wife is joining him, endorsed your campaign early on. Of course, he is a presidential contender for 2012. If asked to be his running mate or even to serve in a Romney administration, would you consider it?
No. I mean, you know, right now I'm running for governor in South Carolina because I think I can bring true change. I've always talked about joining the movement. I don't want the movement to be about a person. I want it to be about the people of this state and reminding elected officials who it is they work for. Just like I said, I was not going to be a part of the negative distractions, these positive distractions and all those while they're flattering. That's just not what Michael and I are thinking about. We are thinking about making a true difference to the people of this state and then turning around and walking away.
So that's a firm no?
Yes.
Thank you.
Congressman Barrett, we know that you've advocated for nuclear energy in Congress, but voters are looking for results.
Yeah.
Please name 3 of your most significant accomplishments since being elected in 2003 to represent the 3rd District.
Well, I thought you were going to ask me about Fred Thompson, you know, because I would be a vice presidential thing, but I'm scrapping and clawing to make a gubernatorial run here. To get serious here. Being part of the Bush tax cuts, I think, was a huge thing. Making sure that people can keep their own tax money, that's a good thing. Being a strong nuclear proponent at the national lab, getting national lab status down in that neck of the woods, making sure that the nuclear surety program of our nation with the Savannah River site is first and foremost on my mind, especially when it comes to my district. But in my legislative career, hands down, whether it's state or federal, it's helping lead the fight on the ban on partial birth abortion. It was a crowning moment in my life. I think it was a wonderful moment in South Carolina, and I don't think anything I could do in my political career could come close to that.
All right, and really putting that same question to you and framing it just a little differently, Representative Haley, in your campaign, you've talked about a lot of things that you fought for in the state legislature. You mentioned earlier that in terms of voting on the record and some other issues in the State House, that you fought those battles for over 2.5 years. But as been mentioned, voters are looking for results. So if elected, since you've been elected, I should say, to represent Lexington County since 2004, please name for the voters watching tonight your 3 most significant accomplishments during your service there.
Absolutely, my 2.5-year brutal battle to get legislators to vote on the record, because I will say, when you get a good government, you can get a working government. Now we have rules in both the House and Senate that require them to vote on the record. We are looking to make that permanent law. It passed the House. We were pushing still to pass it in the Senate to make sure that happens. That is one of the hardest times I've gone through, but one of the most rewarding, because I know that now the people can see how their legislators vote. Workers' comp reform, I was very involved in workers' comp reform, which affects the small businesses of the state. Coastal insurance reform, when people along the coast were losing their homes and having to give up their businesses, I was very involved with that. And I also worked on the fight for tort reform, which also helped our small businesses, as well as keeping the quality of health care good in South Carolina.
Representative Nikki Haley and Congressman Gresham Barrett, the runoff is 5 days from now. We wish you both the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. The hour flew by. We hope you enjoyed watching the debate, that you learned something new about the candidates, and that you participated in our on-live chat tonight to let us know how you think the candidates did, what you thought about the answers that you heard. We'll have much more coverage coming up tonight on WIS News 10 at 11.
And of course, the winner of the Republican, the runoff will of course go against State Senator Vincent Shaheen. That runoff election, just to remind you again, is this coming Tuesday, June 22nd.
And you do still have time to vote absentee. We want to remind everybody to exercise their right to vote, but you probably need to go in person if you want to do that. Much more on WISTV.com. The polls are open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. on Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Good night.
And a quick scheduling note.